Welcome to the Business of Story podcast, where the world's best storytellers from business, Hollywood, and beyond teach you how to use stories to communicate and connect with your customers. The Business of Story is sponsored by ACT, the best-selling customer management software for small business, and by Signal Labs, the real-time cross-media story tracking platform. Here's your host, Park Howell from Park & Co., and today's special Business of Story guest.
There's a story out there, and it may even be a myth, I'm not quite sure, about a shampoo manufacturer whose sales had flattened out, and he was trying to figure out how he could pump them up again. And then he came across a brilliant idea. On the back of his labels of his shampoo bottles, it said lather, rinse, and he's just added the word repeat. And now it has become brand ritual lore. Lather, rinse, repeat, and he doubled his sales just simply by creating a new ritual within the shower. Welcome to the Business of Story, where today we are going to cover brand rituals like, think about plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is. What product comes to mind? Alka-Seltzer, even though I might be dating myself a bit. How about when it absolutely, positively has to be there overnight? FedEx. What about the physical ritual of turning open an Oreo cookie and pulling out that delicious white filling with your teeth? We've all done that, but there's a real ritual around that use with that particular product. How about Red Bull? It gives you wings. So every time you pop the cap of one of those, you throw down a bunch of sugar and caffeine, and you certainly grow wings, or at least it seems like it. What about putting a lime in a Corona? Is that a ritual? Or is that a garnish? Well, that begs the question, what exactly is a brand ritual? So on today, The Business of Story, we are welcoming Zain Raj, Chairman and CEO of Shapiro+Raj, and author of the #1 best-selling marketing book, Brand Rituals, How Successful Brands Bond with Customers for Life. Welcome, Zain.
Glad to be here, Park. How are things?
Things are fantastic. We're very honored to have you with us today. You know, I've been a big fan of your book. I read it several years ago when it first came out, and you and I have become kind of fast friends online. God bless technology. But one of the things that I love so much about brand rituals is how concrete you share tips with the readers on how to make your brand truly a ritualistic property event within consumers' lives. And so today, we're really happy to have you here to share with us, how do brands go about that? Now, before we jump into that, you and I were just catching up before the show began, and you have got a ton of things going. So why don't you let our listeners in a little bit about your history and the other interesting things you have going on, and then we'll jump into brand rituals.
Sounds good. Yeah, so, having spent 30 years in the business of solving problems, right, for companies, for marketers, for brands, and having, spent a lot of time evolving from the world of advertising to the world of marketing service. I was one of the first guys, with a few other colleagues by programming it in COBOL, C++ kind of a thing, right? Done a lot of different things. I've built a bunch of companies along the way. But I think the most satisfying part of things that I've been a part of has been building methodologies and capabilities and approaches that have allowed brands and companies, and therefore clients of mine, to succeed as the world has evolved, right? So brand rituals, thank you for being kind on that. Yeah, it did become a marketing and sales bestseller on Amazon. Was my first point of view, which defined the fact that as our world has shifted, the way brands increase and enhance themselves in value is by becoming bonded with their core customers, right? Where the brand becomes a highly important ritualized part of their lives. And and even though the Oreo examples and all of those examples are appropriate, those are just tactile expressions of the importance of brand plays in people's lives. The real thing that happens with brands is how, they make the customer feel and how they connect by connecting the values that the customer has with values that are consistent with the brand, as well as delivering a specific value. But as you said, we'll talk about that later. Over the last year, I've been, continuing to write. My next book, which is titled Marketing for Tomorrow, Not Yesterday, Surviving and Thriving in the Insight Economy, is scheduled to be released sometime mid-September, as we both know, the right time for any book to come out, the fall. I've got another book, I think, which will surprise people who read stuff I write in February. It is about the world and the economy we live in, but it's about, secrets on how to build great, successful teams. And then I've got, the Brand Rituals 2.0, a much more definitive version with a lot more specific action items and processes that actually, I am going to, offer up to people that they can use themselves as they go down the journey of building rituals. Because in today's open source environment, I don't want to be the one holding on to all of the IP on that. I want to share it with friends, colleagues, clients, and the world at large to use it, because I think as we go open source with the principles of building brands today and tomorrow, I think we all get smarter, and I think we all get more successful. So that's what's coming down the pike. Hope that helps.
That's great. And you are kind of the professor of brand rituals. So could you tell us, what is a brand ritual?
Yeah, I think a brand ritual at a very, very simple aspect is a fundamental relationship which is so bonded and so connected and so compelling between a customer and the brand of choice that if that brand is not available for them, if they can't experience that brand when they need it at that point of time, their world basically becomes dislocated, right? And, what it gives a brand is a high degree of insulation where, nobody else can connect. I mean, I obviously, I don't have to anymore talk about my experiences with Starbucks. Almost everybody, depending on how I look that morning, are able to figure out whether I have been able to stop at a Starbucks, whether I've been able to double cup my 20, whether I've been able to get my 4, brown sugars, whether I got my bike with enough half and half in it, and I was able to align the logos with the, sleeve, and whether I was able to finish it before I got to the meeting, right? And it's fascinating. I mean, the people will come up and go, oh, my God, can somebody please go get this guy his Starbucks? Otherwise, we're going to have a rough morning. That's a brand ritual, right?
They may have an unfair advantage because they have basically legalized addiction that they get to market there with caffeine.
You know what? I mean, that's exactly right. And I think that's because of what they've done, right? They've managed to find a way, because it's not just the coffee, right? It's not the fact that I like Pike Place, because between you and me, actually at home, I brew Starbucks at home as well. And I actually brew the Colombian. But I think fundamentally what they've done is legalized the whole context of creating a custom personal experience. My experience in that environment is so uniquely mine that it cannot be anybody else's. And by making it so uniquely mine and giving me that ability to feel the sense of being grounded, to feel the sense of being connected, to feel the sense of, yes, I have moved to the next stage of my day by doing this, and I've done it the way I do it and nobody else does, is the kind of thing that a ritual needs to do. So the fact to me, and this is one of those things that I've had some very interesting discussions with people, which is the lime going into the corona is not necessarily the most powerful aspect of the corona ritual, right? The more powerful aspect of what makes corona a brand ritual to their core customers is the fact that, that every time you drink that, you get the sense of freedom of being on a beach, on vacation, with your feet in a warm sand and relaxed. And the fact that you put a lime in is one aspect of it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but the people who've actually perfected the ritual, quote, which is the new, is not just lime, right? There's a pinch of salt that has to go in before the lime gets pushed in, and the lime has to be a certain wedge. It can't just be any different way, okay? And then you put a thumb on it, you shake that, and then you put it in your mouth so that the first spray of Corona actually refreshes you all the way in. That's the new Corona ritual, my friend.
So you've got the visceral connection to the product that way. Plus, they do a really nice job of storytelling to get you to transport yourself, supposedly, when you grab that Corona and in your mind's eye, picture yourself sitting on the beach and carving your toes into the warm sand, like you said.
Exactly.
So story plays a big part of creating that ritual.
I think storytelling, or, the way I describe it, creating a narrative, right, absolutely is one of the most absolute integral parts of a ritual becoming established, and a ritual becoming entrenched, and a ritual becoming personal, right? Mm-hmm. Think about it. I mean, nothing brings emotion into a context of an experience unless there is a narrative around it. Mm-hmm. Why is this important? When is it important? What would I need to know for it to be really important, and how does it evolve over time, right? So when I told you, that's the reason why I talked about my Starbucks story, right? There is a narrative around why Starbucks is so important in my life and nothing else will do. And it's a narrative that not only me, but people around me are also familiar with, that it makes things very easy. I'll give you another example, right? I mean, I was actually in a meeting here, and an early morning, and there are days when, I may have a later breakfast, and this lady kind of, looked at me when she saw, the fact that I got, a sandwich, and she goes, "Oh boy, is that like the number 2 from McDonald's?" And this lady is one of the people who works at our company, right? She's come to see me about something, and it's like, even that now quote has become some sort of a ritual for people to actually recognize it. But stories and narratives are the starting point of understanding the value of a ritual, right? So think about, as you, introduced me, you kind of talked about we become fast friends on the internet, There was a narrative that you had to set to communicate our relationship. Mm-hmm. So when we build a bond with a brand, which is the final stage of a ritual, that bond is built when a customer, not a consumer, not a prospect, but a customer who's been consuming your product or service, which is a brand, for a period of time, fundamentally aligns with the values of the brand, because the values mirror their values or are consistent with their values, and they believe that they're getting the right set of value aspects from the brand as well, right? So whatever money I'm paying you or whatever time I spend going to look for you, you are reciprocating back with equal amounts of value, and your values also align. And once you have those, then how those become relevant requires a story to be created, because nothing makes things real for people other than a story. And so the story that goes, I talk to people about my passion for ping golf clubs, right? Now, do you play golf, Park?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Obviously you should, right? Living on the West Coast, why wouldn't you? Right?
And Phoenix, Arizona, one of the golf capitals anywhere, right?
Exactly. Guys like me in Chicago, we only get 4.5 months of golf, right? So we are even more fanatical, right? So,
exactly.
But the interesting thing about being fanatical is, every year I see a lot of people that go and change their clubs out, right? So one year they may be playing TaylorMade because TaylorMade's got this new innovation. The next year they got paying that. I have, I started with, when I started playing golf 7 years ago, I bought Adams. I was loyal to them for a couple of years, and then I discovered Ping. And ironically, for the last 6 years, I have been playing Pings. Doesn't mean I don't keep upgrading to the next generation of Pings, but I've played Pings. And so people look at me and go, "What's wrong with you? Look, this TaylorMade is so much better." My son, who's, varsity level golfer, used to do the same thing. Like, "Dad, come on, get with the program." And I'm like, no, I played with the Pings, with my first set of Pings, after I got them custom fit and I bought them, was the first time I actually had a birdie on that round. I actually had 2 pars on that round, and I actually had a hole-in-one in the round, right?
Wow. So now were you lucky or good, or was it the clubs?
No, I think I was lucky, good on the clubs. There's something called beginner's luck on everything. Right? It doesn't matter what you're doing the first time when you do anything. Now, golf, as you know, you do get beginner's luck occasionally, because there's a god up there that just focuses on golfers and realizes that, what do I need to do to bring him back the next time so I can create a lot of pain for him? But before I can give him pain, he has to learn the pleasure, right? Mm-hmm. And so, no, but it was amazing, right? Because first time in my life I played with my custom fit clubs. Now, obviously, I'd used them on the range and stuff to practice. But it was fascinating. That round was a round of my dreams until I got to the 10th hole, right? And then I had a bogey, I had a triple, I destroyed the entire good feeling of the first 9. But the first 9, the way my ball was going 20 yards further, they were going, in the direction I was hitting them. They felt really great. And it's been fascinating. I've tried other clubs. It doesn't really matter. Now, you would think I'm a Ping fanatic. Yes, I am. I'm a big Ping customer, right? Except for my driver. But it doesn't matter. That driver, for some reason, I hold it in my hand, and I hit my drives, and they always are in the fairway, right?
But you bought into and you lived the Ping story in that round with that first round with your Ping clubs, where you had all that wonderful round and then not so good on the back 9, underscores that whole concept about where so many people think, God giveth and taketh away. Well, I think the golf gods actually taketh and giveth away. It's really hard to get much out of them. But I think this is a great point within the conversation, Zain, where I need to stop for a minute and thank our wonderful sponsors for this program that bring you and other great minds to the business of story. So we'll be right back after this message.
Your customers, employees, marketing campaigns, partners, and yes, your detractors, they're each telling a story right now about you. Where? On social media, in traditional print publications, in blog posts, on television, basically everywhere. And it's happening 24/7, in real time. Your mission? Track these stories and the sources that share them, smartly manage them, analyze them rapidly, and discern what you should do next, what you should do now. No wonder you're tired. Well, Signal Labs is a real-time, cross-media story tracking platform that makes your life easier. Their solution enables customers to quickly spot trends, see relevant stories unfold, and take action. So stay ahead of what the world thinks with Signal Labs. Learn more and sign up for a free demo at signallabs.com/story. Are you keeping track of sales leads in a spreadsheet? Or worse, Post-it notes all over your desk? Well, there's a better way, and it doesn't involve spending a fortune on complex CRM software. For over 25 years, ACT has been the #1 best-selling contact and customer management software. It's super affordable and easy to use. ACT helps individuals, small businesses, and sales teams organize prospect and customer details in just one place. It also helps you market products and services more effectively, and most importantly, it drives sales. Try ACT for 30 days by visiting actstory.com and sign up for a chance to win a pair of Bose Quiet Comfort 20i acoustic noise-canceling headphones, a $299 value. Again, that's actstory.com.
Well, welcome back to the Business of Story, and today's guest, Zain Raj, a fabulous marketer and the author of Brand Rituals, How Successful Brands Bond with Customers for Life. I came across Zain's work several years ago as we were creating our 10-step story cycle process. And as you may know by now, if you've been a listener for a while, our process is actually based off of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And although he had 17 steps in his marvelous monomyth about how stories unfold, we boiled those down to 10 steps that marketers can use to craft and tell their compelling stories that sell. And they begin, with the backstory, where have you been, who's your hero, which is always about your customer, what's at stake, what is it that they want, what is the inciting incident, what's the tension in the marketplace that really makes you relevant in their mind's eye. Of course, what are the obstacles and antagonists they're up against to adopt and embrace and bond with your product, as well as what are the obstacles you are up against as a brand. Then we get into Enter the Mentor, and this is where the brand persona really lives, the brand essence. Then we move into the next chapters of the journey, which is about customer engagement, celebrating the successes, the initial successes, which starts building that brand bond ritual. Our last two chapters, and Zain, you've talked a lot about this, is the moral of the story. And when it gets right down to it, what is the moral of the story? The moral is what are the values and ethics that we stand for as a company, as a brand, and how do we connect with the shared values of our audiences, making sure that that is implicit and explicitly clear in the stories we tell about our brands. And then our final chapter, and this is where your book really had an enormous impact on me, Zain, and it's called To Be Continued, or Building Rituals Around Your Brand. What is different about our story cycle than Joseph Campbell's hero's journey? His is a one-and-done thing. You have a hero in an ordinary world, propels himself into an extraordinary world, learns a lot in the process, returns to their ordinary world with what is called the boon to help themselves and those around them lead better lives, essentially. What we believe with the story cycle and all brand marketers, and very much in step with what you do with brand, bonding with brand and brand rituals, is that it needs to be a virtuous cycle. Because once you've gone through the story cycle one time, you now have this bond with your customer, and how can you grow that bond through the very rituals that you have studied and you share in your books and your upcoming the Brand Rituals 2.0. So my question to you, Zain, what exactly is a brand ritual?
Well, Park, a brand ritual is fundamentally a relationship and a quality of a relationship that a brand has with its most core and most loyal customers. This is a relationship which has got a high degree of insulation. It's also a relationship where in that customer's lives, nothing else but that specific brand will do, because what the brand does, it fulfills a set of needs that are not only the rational or the emotional needs that most brands attempt to build their relationships around, but fulfill the more subconscious needs that are built around the attachment, where the values of that customer are so closely aligned with the values of the brand, and therefore what the brand does for the customer is fulfills that one very absolutely human need that they have of having a bond with products, services, people, and things that absolutely make their lives what they are.
Well, what is the difference then between a habit using a brand and actually creating a brand ritual around it?
Well, it's very simple, right? So I think what most people go through over time as they build their relationships with the brands is they go through three stages. The stage one is what is a habit. Stage two is what is a routine, and then stage three is when you get to a ritual, and if you're a brand, that's when you become a brand ritual. A habit is a very simple thing. It's something that you do habitually where you're programmed to kind of operate the same way. In the world of brands, let's use coffee as an example, given the fact that if I don't have my first couple of cups of coffee every morning and are the right ones, my day doesn't really start and it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if you take the world of coffee, if you have a habit of drinking coffee, it doesn't matter what brand of coffee it is. Well, if you're brewing it at home, you picked up, either Maxwell House or Folgers or some such brand from the grocery store, whatever was on deal, and you're making yourself coffee on your coffee machine at home. But on a routine, it's mostly where, a few brands might fulfill your needs, but you are not very picky which one it is. And that's what happens when a lot of people, when they drive down, they'll either stop at a McDonald's or they'll stop at a Dunkin' Donuts or maybe a Caribou Coffee, whatever shows up on the right-hand side of the road. They will stop out there and grab a cup of coffee because coffee is important to them, and they want not a specific brand, but they want options of certain brands that they're willing to look at. When you get to a ritual, it's like what happens with me. I will not, and I choose not to drink any other brand of coffee than a Starbucks. And for me, Starbucks becomes a brand because when I go to a Starbucks store, it creates an experience that for me is the right, most welcoming experience, but it also creates an experience that I can customize for myself. So I drink my coffee in a very specific way. I drink, I have to have a double cup. It's a venti. It has to be the pie place, and it has to have room for some half and half, and I have to have my 3 packets of brown sugar. I have to align the sleeve with the cap so that everything kind of looks perfectly similar. Just going through that one simple act every morning, it doesn't matter what part of the world I'm in. I normally pick my hotels based on their location from a Starbucks. And on my way, when I drive to work or when I drive to the airport or when I, drive to the train station, I have my Starbucks along the way, which is where I stop. And that's the same way I drink my coffee. That to me is a ritual, because I have a brand now that allows me to actually fulfill my need, but allows me to do it within the context of the values that it holds. Let me give you another example of why values are important when you build a ritual, right? It's people. When you meet different people, you can become an acquaintance, you can become a colleague, but the deeper the relationship, that happens when you find that you share the same values. I'll give you an example, a dry cleaner, which has become part of my ritual, right? I go to a dry cleaners, I've got options of 4 within the 2 strip malls right across the street from each other, of both of those malls 5 minutes from my house. I go to the one who is the most expensive out of the 3, but the reason why I go there is because everything that they do in terms of their laundry is ecologically sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. They don't use plastics. They use the laundry detergents and softeners that are absolutely green. Mm-hmm. They actually give you your clothes in a green cloth covering, which you recycle with them every week. And it's 60% more expensive for me than the dry cleaner 6 shop fronts down. But I'd rather go there because the values that I have of let's do everything in our power to protect our environment. And oh, by the way, I know my clothes are getting the best in terms of the quality. And that's the distinction between a brand ritual or a routine or a habit, because there's so many people who will go to any dry cleaner, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as they find another dry cleaner that can dry clean cheaper than their dry cleaner, they'll go out there because for them, everybody is, any one of those brands are things that they can change. In this case, for me, Starbucks is a brand that has been part of my ritual for over the last 15 years. And, people ask me constantly, is it going to change? Are you going to find somebody else? And I go, frankly, I'm not looking for somebody else. I've been married 26 years. I guess I can continue drinking coffee at least for that long. So I've got about another good 10 years on me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting when you said when you shop at Starbucks that you actually get your coffee and then you align the sipper with the seam in the cup.
I know, not with the seam, because if you align it with the seam, it's going to drip on your collar, right? So what you do is you make sure the seam is on the opposite side, but I align it with the logo of the second cup and the logo of the sleeve with the sipping thing. Now, I see. I like everything symmetrical. That's me being completely compulsive.
Well, and now I can see how your Starbucks addiction and your dry cleaners work hand in hand if you get a little, sip on your collar there. So what you're basically saying then is a habit is a very commoditized act. The Maxwell House, I'll just go buy the cheapest brand, throw it in my pantry, and have it in the morning, where a brand ritual is about the value or the value add of a brand. And in both cases, you talked about really opting for the most expensive option because it's a ritual within your life that has real meaning.
Exactly. And, and I think what you find is in these 2 cases, it's the most expensive, right? But in the case of my breakfast food, which is waffles and pancakes that I love eating, most days, I go with Eggo. And Eggo is not any more expensive or less expensive than its competitive set. But what Eggo has able to do is provide me with products that absolutely are right for me and that fulfill my need for the kind of breakfast I like to have. And they also, from a value standpoint, connect the dots by making sure that, their innovation and everything that they're doing is focused around the quality of ingredients and the quality of food from a Kellogg as a company standpoint. So price is a factor sometimes, but it's more the experience and the quality of the content, if you will, right, and the quality of the value. So to me, I love the way you talk about habit is a commodity, ritual is value add. But it's value add with 2 components, right? You got to have the value in terms of the product and the price. Equation has to be right, but also has to have aligned values, where the values that the brand holds are consistent and or are aligned with the values that their customer group owns, right? That's the only way. You have to have that. Otherwise, you're never going to build that quality of a bond, which is what a ritual is. A highly bonded relationship.
And Zain, how do you see that story or brand storytelling plays into the creation of a ritual or evolving someone from a habit into a ritual around your product?
It's very simple, right? I mean, storytelling, I use the word narratives, but storytelling is how any relationship gets built. If you ever introduce anybody in your life, right, like if I ever introduce my wife to somebody who's never met us before, I tell them about how, I met her in India when she was there for my brother's wedding, how I proposed to her in a cab in India 3 months later, yada, yada. All relationships, especially the deep and the meaningful relationships, are built around a series of interactions and a series of exchanges where value gets exchanged to mutual advantage. And you can't build a brand bond, and you can't get to a ritual without having those steps along the way. And those steps are stories that are waiting to be told or are constantly being told as a way on how brands get there. Without storytelling, you don't have rituals. Without stories, you don't have a depth of empathy that builds the context around the values people hold. So storytelling, narratives are very, very powerful factors towards building deep bonded relationships.
And then, of course, too, they have to back it up so they can tell very powerful narrative stories to get you enticed to have you come into their coffee shop or the cleaners or whatever. But then they certainly have to live the story and encourage their customers to then recount and share that story with their folks to help spread the word.
Exactly. You can't have a narrative without a foundation for a story, right? And then once you have a foundation for the story, you better not start having cracks in that foundation, because you're never going to get to a ritual, right? You're going to lose them at an earlier stage of the relationship development. It's like having somebody, that you've been dating for 6 months. And a good friend of mine used to tell the story beautifully well. She's now the head of marketing at Mondelez. But it's like having, you've been dating somebody for 6 months. You finally get to a point where you invite them for dinner, right, to your parents' house. And you're sitting down for dinner, and this person decides to blow their nose on the tablecloth. Okay, that's what a lot of brands do, right? I mean, you're done at that point in time, and all of the work that you've done so far is gone. I mean, it's a very graphic way of articulating it. She does it way better than I do, but the end outcome is still the same. As end outcome, you find yourself having, lost a customer, a potential bonded customer that could be your biggest advocate, just because you decided to, have a very inappropriate moment at a very important part of the time when they were trying to build a deeper relationship with you. And it's actually scary how many brands can get you from a transaction to an attraction, and get you almost close to building a connection, which is a stage before a bond, and then just do something so ridiculously crazy that you kind of wonder. I just wrote, my next book, and I wrote a blog about this, United Airlines. I've flown United for decades. I was one of the global services members for a long, long time, which is an invitation-only group. I just didn't fly for personal reasons last year, and guess what? They dropped me from global services. But it's not even, and then they said, we'll temporarily put you back on because we know you're good for it, Mr. Raj. They never did. And on the flip side, you have American Airlines, who I didn't fly as much over the last 4 or 5 years. They called and wanted to find out why I wasn't flying them, and I said, I'm dealing with some personal stuff, not flying this year. They said, we understand, we look forward to having you there, and they grandfathered my status in front of the year, right? Because, again, when you have 20, 25 years of history, right, that they can actually see, it's pretty easy. But, guess what United did? They took me from being a bonded customer where even if I had the choice of the same 2 airlines and American was cheaper, I was flying United. Now I've decided, you know what? Not really. I'll actually give my custom to American. And when you think about how much money I spend when I travel, it's actually just the silliest decision that they made. This was like blowing their nose in my tablecloth, right? It's crazy.
Well, they're looking at you as a number, as a commodity, and they're not thinking you as a ritualized customer that they want to bend over backwards for.
And that's a fundamental, and you hit it. They're looking at me as a decile, right? I went from the top decile to the second top decile, and so they dropped me, versus, treating me as a person and a human being. And they should know better than most that there are people who travel a lot. They're not going to not travel a lot, because that's just, when you do it like I do and like we do, right, in our business for 30 years nonstop, you travel over $250,000 to plus miles a year, you're not going to go down and not travel anymore, right? I mean, it happens because of some changes that happen in your lives, and you're going to come back, and it's short-sighted when brands are not able to look at. And I think that's the other part. The one other interesting thing is, in a technology-enabled world that we live in, right? It's fascinating how much of these kind of relationships have been delegated now to their technology infrastructure.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
So, guess what? Well, the people who in the old days were at least looking at it, and this is where American that invented the airline loyalty program, right, with with their program, were the ones who actually decided not to trust their computers and just call personally, right? And United, which was the follower in that, has suddenly decided to let the computers decide who stays, who doesn't. And boy, what a silly mistake.
Yeah. I mean, just throwing a wet blanket on that relationship, I've got to quickly tell you my United story. My wife and I flew over to London, and then we were working with our ASU class down in Amsterdam, and then we finished up our trip in Paris, and I flew United. I'm not a frequent flyer with them, but I do quite a lot of traveling, and so they had a chance to really bring me, I guess, into the fold. And the other part of this story is I had back surgery, fairly significant back surgery, about 5 weeks before this trip, so I wasn't really feeling great when I left. Luckily, a friend of mine had some passes to the United Club in Houston where we had a 4-hour layover, so I used those, and it was great, just stretched my legs out and enjoyed that part of the trip. Coming back, we were only to have a 90-minute layover in Newark until, of course, they canceled our flight, and we went from 90 minutes to a 7-hour layover. So I just sent them a really quite quick, nice little note, said, hey, this back issue, is there any chance that my wife and I could hang out in the lounge? We won't drink your free booze. We won't eat your free food. Just need a more comfortable place than, sprawling out in the Newark lobby. And they said, no, can't do it. Sorry. And I just think, wow, there was an opportunity of doing something very simple to bring me into their fold, and it's done just the opposite. So.
It's amazing, right? I mean, you look at it, and ironically, and this is in my next book that's coming out, but I did write a note to the CMO of United and the guy, president of Mileage Plus Holdings, who I know quite well, and who I've actually defined in that book as a decathlete marketeer, right? And and I sent a note to him, and I said, look, I mean, here's the deal. And he goes, yeah, let me connect you with the lady who runs the Mileage Plus program, right? And so we get connected with the lady. She goes, yeah, as long as you fly enough for $13,000 worth before May, we should be able to kind of retain your status. Well, here's the irony. The next week is when I was flying actually to Asia to speak at a couple of conferences with my wife, right? So we were both flying first. Okay, that's about almost a $45,000 tickets that we bought, right? That I bought. We fly all over Europe, Asia, and come back. My status hasn't, it's still at 1K, right? Then 2 weeks later, I fly to Europe and back again and first. Yeah, my status hasn't changed. It's now July. My status hasn't changed. Right? I'm still at 1K. And the irony is, as we were flying to, India for the first leg of the conference, we bumped into friends of ours who's a global CFO at Levi's. He and his wife, so he's global. They only had 2 globals, on that flight, and then they had 2 1Ks, which I was one of the 2. So there are 4 of us. They boarded the 2 globals, first, but they made the 1Ks, me and this other couple, board with everybody else on our international flight on Group 1, which was about 60 people. Right? So, I mean, you look at it and you go, what is wrong with you guys? I mean, you get a list. It shows you the only 4 premium customers that you really have, right? Why wouldn't you just have the other 2 couples also go when you're, holding everybody else off for the, But, as I've been told by a bunch of people, you sound a lot like sour grapes, and stop complaining, because in 1K, your life is so much better than my life in economy.
Yeah.
Right?
But it does underscore the earlier point that they tell a good story and fly the friendly skies, but they certainly don't live or deliver it. They do, in fact, quite the opposite, and that's just a shame. So they're not going to build a brand ritual. Last question for you real quick. You wrote a fantastic book, Brand Rituals, that I've loved and I've shared with a lot of people. Can you tell us a little bit what is about that book, and then tell us about your new book coming out?
Yeah, so I think Brand Rituals was a book about how do we now think about the way brand relationships have evolved as the world has evolved over the last 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. And that came out of the perspective of, if you look at the traditional brand building methodologies, a majority of them were created and what I call the attention economy, which was when mass marketing was king, right? We had the USPs, the positionings, and stuff like that. And then over the last couple of decades, the methodologies all evolved towards, much more data centricity, and where we all became deciles in numbers versus human beings, right? And my perspective was the way you build brands is not by trying to make people believe certain things and feel certain things about your product or service, but it's about the kind of value that you can create by making sure that people use it consistently and make it an important part of their life. Because the only reason for a brand to be successful and to exist in any company is if it drives huge amount of profitable growth for the company, okay? So that was the premise behind it. My next book is again, taking off on the whole aspect of, I've seen the world change, right? And the way I've defined it is we've moved over the last year into a new economic era that I'm calling the insight economy. And the reason why we've moved here is all of the data and the deluge of data that people have gotten so excited about has not fulfilled its potential of actually making things easier, either for the consumer nor for the marketeer, right? All it's done is force people to look at the trees versus or look at the forest and try to understand what the big, powerful opportunities are. And in the world that we all live in as consumers and as marketeers, in a huge time-starved world, we need to have a point of view about what product or service and how does it help solve my problem. And so I've called this new economy the insight economy, because this is the world where we need to understand our customers not as numbers, not as things, not as people who will buy my stuff, but as human beings, where brands need to exist to serve their needs in the most distinct manner by solving real problems that they have in a way that's empathetic and that's authentic, and do it so that they are a resource in their lives versus, something else that the consumer or the customer needs to worry about. I'm actually quite excited. I mean, this was a proposition I discovered as I was kind of consulting with a client about 6-7 months ago. I started writing about it on my blogs, and the response has been amazing. I think everybody, there's a lot of people in the world of marketing looking to figure out why are things that worked for me a couple of years ago no longer working, right? And it's because, while we were focused on trying to understand our data and trying to understand what to do with stuff like that and trying to figure out what decile our customers fit in, the world shifted and the customer shifted, and truly understanding where the customer is and what their new expectations are and how to fulfill them better than anybody else is what will allow brands to survive in the future. And if they really want to thrive, then they need to be thinking about the world very, very differently. And so I'm talking about this new world and the new way people can win.
And in this book and your insights that you share, do you help them understand how to turn big data into epic drama? How do they use brand storytelling to connect, to make that data make sense and help guide them in the stories they tell?
Yeah, and I think so. It's not about making big data into epic drama, right? It's about using what they can get out of big data. So I talk about interrogating the data, right? Big, small, ugly, indifferent. Instead of trying to figure out how many needles exist in the haystack, is to kind of interrogate the data so you can find the one needle that's right for that customer. And then absolutely, once you find the customer, like you and I talked earlier, you can't get to having the customer believe that your brand can do what they need done better than anybody else unless you add a story to it, unless you give them a narrative that they can articulate. And so, storytelling, as you have said in your book, which I personally love, so it's a mutual kind of admiration society part. But,
Thank you.
But I think as you said in your book, and as we know, right, it doesn't matter. For the last 30,000 years, as human beings have evolved, and as we've seen different societies that have emerged and have, gone away and new ones come in, the one thing that has connected humankind has been stories, right? Mm-hmm. It has been, whether it's around a fireplace or it's a story that I said in a cave and then I drew out some pictures as a way to kind of, memorialize that. Storytelling is what's built into each of us as human beings. That's why, we read stories to our kids when they're growing up, right? That's why, That's why we watch movies. That's why. And frankly, I'm Indian, right? So I come from the world of movies. We make 1,000+ movies in Bollywood every year.
Oh, yeah.
Because we love stories, right? Because nothing connects people with things other than stories at a deep, emotive, human level. And that's the context of the new book. It's about we are human beings first and foremost. We're not numbers, okay? We are, and as human beings, we have very, very specific needs, and that we're looking for very specific brands or products or services to help solve in very specific ways. But for them to be able to do it that specifically, they got to recognize that I am a little crazy. I'm a little,
right,
cuckoo. I am opinionated. I have very, very distinct set of expectations, and I may swing from one way to the other. But at the end of the day, if you can fulfill my needs really well, I am absolutely one of your most loyal customers. And I'm not describing myself. I'm describing my wife, right? And as David Ogilvy said, almost 40 years ago, don't treat your customer like she's stupid. She's your wife, right? And she is, because she's smart and she knows what she wants. And brands that absolutely treat her with the respect that she deserves will gain her absolute loyalty. And that's what we in the business of marketing need to recognize that and embrace that. And that's what the book is about.
And it brings it full circle to building brand rituals around products and services that matter, that bring meaning to people's life, and that deliver day in and day out.
You got it.
Well, thank you very much for your time on today's show, Zain. I really, really appreciate it. Looking forward to your new books coming out, and especially looking at Brand Rituals 2.0, because I'm curious, what else have you found about the magical mystery of creating brand rituals in one's life? It's been terrific having you here.
Thank you. Likewise.
And I'd like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to the Business of Story. And please go to our website where we have lots of tools that you can download right now to help you become a storyteller, a better storyteller, to help you advance your cause further and faster. And I'd also like to say I'm such a big believer in Zain's book that I purchased 5 of them. And I will give one away to the first 5 people that go to our website, thebusinessofstory.com, and download the interactive PDF. You can start crafting your stories using the story cycle, and the first 5 of you that go there and do that, I will be happy to send you one of Zain's books, because as he said earlier, this is about open source marketing ideas and expertise. And Zain's gone out of his way to do that for me and for us, and so I would like to share that forward. Thank you, Zain. And finally, please go to iTunes and let us know how you like the show. Write a review down. If you like it, share it with others. We're always eager to hear what worked for you and where you could use some more information to help you grow yourself as the innate storyteller you are, so that you can go out and truly nudge the world in any direction you choose. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Park & Co., Zignal Labs, and ACT, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts.